I told my son, you will marry the girl I choose. He said, no. I told him she is Bill Gates' daughter. He said, okay. I called Bill Gates and said, I want your daughter to marry my son. Bill Gates said, no. I told Bill Gates, my son is the CEO of the World Bank. Bill Gates said, okay. I called the president of the World Bank and asked him to make my son the CEO. He said, no. I told him, my son is Bill Gates' son-in-law. He said, okay. This is exactly how politics works. A Saudi prince wants to buy a bull, so he goes to see a famous Russian bovine breeder. The Russian tells him, I have many good animals. Here is a Swedish bull. He was born black, but the color turns white as he grows. Over there is an American bull. Color when born is red, but it becomes dark brown when fully grown. And here, Turkish bull. They are born dark brown, but grow up to be light brown. The prince says, I rather like the Turkish bulls. Fine specimens indeed. Excellent choice, your majesty. But the Turkish bull is special. They are bred for royalty, like you. But if you have royal blood, you must be bonding with a bull calf when young, before they change color, or they will reject you, the Russian explains. Well, the prince says, I'm looking for a strong, adult bull. I'm not particularly interested in buying a calf. I rather like this big, beige bull over here. The prince attempts to pet the large Turkish bull. It sniffs his hand, shakes its head in disgust, turns around, and kicks the prince with its hind legs. The prince goes flying across the room and lands in a pile of hay. Where did you get such a horrible beast? Why did it kick me? He sputters. I told you. He is from Turkey, the Russian explains, is Tambul, and can't stand a noble. My husband and I were dressed and ready to go out for a lovely evening of dinner and theater. Having been burgled in the past, we turned on a night light in the answering machine, then put the cat in the backyard. When our cab arrived, we walked out our front door, and our rather tubby cat scooted between our legs inside, then ran up the stairs. Because our cat likes to chase our budgie, we really didn't want to leave them unchaperoned. So my husband ran inside to retrieve her and put her in the backyard again. Because I didn't want the taxi driver to know our house was going to be empty all evening, I explained to him that my husband would be out momentarily as he was just bidding good night to my mother. A few minutes later, he got into the cab, all hot and bothered, and said, to my growing horror and amusement, as the cab pulled away, sorry it took so long, but the stupid bitch was hiding under the bed, and I had to poke her ass with a coat hanger to get her to come out. She tried to take off, so I grabbed her by the neck and wrapped her in a blanket so she wouldn't scratch me like she did last time. But it worked. I hauled her fat ass down the stairs and threw her into the backyard. She had better not shit in the vegetable garden again. The silence in the taxi was deafening. There are 5 cows, a mama cow, and 4 baby calves on a farm. The first baby comes up to the mom and asks, Mama, why am I called Rose? The mommy cow replies, well, honey, a rose petal fell on your head when you were born. The next calf walks up to the mom and asks, Mama, why is my name Lily? The mommy cow replies, because, honey, a lily petal fell on your head when you were born. The third baby comes up and asks, Mama, why is my name Daisy? The mommy cow replies again, well, when you were born, a daisy petal fell on your head. The final baby walks over and says, Rubut duh. The mama cow says, honey, shut up, Cinderblock. An elderly couple in their early 60s was celebrating their 35th wedding anniversary at Candlelit Bistro. Right as they toasted, a tiny, glittering fairy materialized on their table. Because you two have been an exemplary, faithful couple for over 3 decades, the fairy chimed, I will grant you each one magical wish. The wife gasped with joy. Oh, I want to travel the entire world with my darling husband. With a quick flick of the fairy's wand, abracadabra, 2 first-class tickets for a luxury global cruise materialized in her hands. Then it was the husband's turn. He looked at his wife, then at the fairy, and decided to take a ruthless gamble. Well, this is romantic and all, but an opportunity like this only comes once in a lifetime. I'm sorry, honey, but my wish is to have a wife 30 years younger than me." The wife was heartbroken, and the fairy gave him a look of pure disappointment. But a promise was a promise. The fairy raised her wand, spun in a circle, and abracadabra, the husband instantly aged into a frail 92-year-old. A young boy had just gotten his driver's permit and inquired of his father if they could discuss his use of the car. His father said, "I'll make a deal with you. You bring your grades up from AC to AB average, study your Bible a little, and get your hair cut, and we'll talk about the car." Well, the boy thought about that for a moment and settled for the offer, and they agreed on it. After about 6 weeks, they went into the study, where his father said, "Son, I've been really proud. You brought your grades up, and I've observed that you have been studying your Bible and participating a lot more in the Bible study groups. But I'm really disappointed since you haven't gotten your hair cut." The young man paused a moment and then said, "Dad, I've been thinking about that, and I've noticed in my studies of the Bible that Samson had long hair, John the Baptist had long hair, Moses had long hair, and there's even a strong argument that Jesus had long hair also." To this, his father replied, "Did you also notice they all walked everywhere they went?" Two friends decided to try out duck hunting for the very first time. They bought all the premium camo gear, rented a boat, borrowed a highly trained retriever dog, and headed out into the marsh at sunrise. After sitting out in the freezing cold for 6 grueling hours, they still hadn't managed to bag a single duck. Frustrated and shivering, one of them threw her hands up in the air and groaned, "I just don't get it. We've been out here all morning. Why on earth aren't we getting any ducks?" Her friend turned to her, shook her head with total confidence, and replied, "Look, I keep telling you, I just don't think we're throwing the dog high enough." A man stops by a cafe for breakfast. After paying the tab, he checks his pockets and leaves his tip, 3 pennies. As he strides toward the door, his waitress muses, only half to herself, "You can tell a lot about a man by the tip he leaves." The man turns around, curiosity getting the better of him. "Oh, really? Tell me, what does my tip say?" "Well, this penny tells me you're a thrifty man." Barely able to conceal his pride, the man utters, "True enough. And this penny, it tells me you're a bachelor." Surprised at her perception, he says, "Well, that's true too. And the 3rd penny tells me that your father was one too." A torrential downpour had passed through town, leaving a massive, muddy puddle right in front of the local Irish tavern. An old, weathered man stood right at the edge of the puddle. He was holding a crooked stick with a piece of twine tied to the end, dangling it directly into the dirty rainwater and gently jiggling it up and down. A well-dressed gentleman stepped out of his car, stopped, and watched this bizarre sight for a few moments. Completely bewildered, he walked over and asked, "Excuse me, sir, but what exactly are you doing there?" The old man didn't even look up. "Fishing," he replied simply. "Poor old fool." The gentleman thought to himself, feeling a deep wave of sympathy for the elderly man standing out in the damp air. Wanting to get him out of the cold, the gentleman smiled and said, "Look, why don't you come inside with me? Let me buy you a warm drink." The old man happily accepted, reeled in his string, and followed him into the warmth of the pub. As they sat at the bar sipping a pair of premium Irish whiskeys, the gentleman decided to spark up some light, polite conversation. He smiled gently and asked, "So, out of curiosity, how many have you caught today?" The old man took a slow sip of his whiskey, smiled radiantly, and replied, "You're the 8th." A man realized he was in absolutely no condition to drive after a long night out, so he wisely chose to leave his keys with the bartender and walk home instead. As he was stumbling and swaying unsteadily down the sidewalk, a police cruiser pulled up alongside him. An officer stepped out, crossing his arms. "Sir, it's 2 o'clock in the morning," the officer said sternly. "Where exactly do you think you're heading in this condition?" The man blinked heavily, trying to steady himself, and replied with complete seriousness, "I'm currently on my way to attend a mandatory lecture." The officer raised an eyebrow, thoroughly skeptical. "Oh, really? And who on earth is giving an academic lecture at 2 a.m. on a Saturday? The man let out a heavy, terrified sigh and answered, "My wife." A husband walked into the kitchen and casually mentioned to his wife, "Hey, sweetheart, just wanted to let you know I invited an old buddy of mine over to our place for dinner tonight." His wife spun around, absolutely furious. "What? Are you completely out of your mind? The house is a total disaster. I haven't gone grocery shopping all week. The sink is overflowing with dirty dishes, and I am absolutely not in the mood to cook a fancy meal." The husband nodded calmly. "Yeah, I know all of that." The wife glared at him, utterly bewildered. "Then why on earth would you intentionally invite a guest over for dinner tonight?" The husband took a slow sip of his coffee and replied, "Because the poor fool is seriously thinking about getting married." Jack and Jill went up the hill. Two young persons of opposite genders proceeded toward the apex of a natural geologic protuberance. The purpose of their expedition was to procure a sample of fluid hydride of oxygen in a large vessel, the exact size of which was ominously omitted from the record. As the male person precipitously descended, he consequently sustained severe damage to the upper cranial portion of his anatomy. A similar fate befell the female, who, immediately after the male person, performed a self-rotational translation oriented in the same direction, having been traversed by the young man. A chap, sitting in Harry's bar at Singapore's Changi Airport, noticed a very beautiful woman sitting next to him. He thought to himself, "Wow, she's so gorgeous, she must be a flight attendant. But which airline does she work for?" Hoping to pick her up, he leaned towards her and uttered the Delta Airlines slogan, "Love to fly, and it shows." She gave him a blank, confused stare, and he immediately thought to himself, "Oh, crap, she doesn't work for Delta." A moment later, another slogan popped into his head. He leaned towards her again. "Something special in the air." She gave him the same confused look. He mentally kicked himself and scratched Singapore Airlines off the list. Next, he tried the Thai Airways slogan, "Smooth as silk." This time the woman turned on him. "What the heck do you want?" The man smiled, then slumped back in his chair and said, "At Qantas." A well-dressed, handsome man enters the first-class section of an international flight and is seated next to a very beautiful woman in her mid-30s. After an hour or so into the flight, the young man turns to the woman and says, "Excuse me, but would you make love to me for $1 million? To which she replies after considering for a second or two, "Yes, I suppose so." Nothing more was said about it until about an hour later, when the young man again turns to the woman and says, "Would you make love to me for $50? To which she snaps at him, "No way, what sort of woman do you think I am?" He says, "I know what sort of woman you are. We're just trying to negotiate a price." Helen Clark, Prime Minister of New Zealand, is rudely awoken at 4 a.m. by the telephone. "Helen, it's the Health Minister here. Sorry to bother you at this hour, but there is an emergency. I've just received word that the Durex factory in Auckland has burned to the ground. It is estimated that the entire New Zealand supply of condoms will be gone by the end of the week. Shoot, the economy will never be able to cope with all those unwanted babies. We'll be ruined. We're going to have to ship some in from abroad. Britain, no chance. The Palms will have a field day on this one. What about Australia? Maybe, but we don't want them to know that we are stuck. You call John Howard. Tell him we need 1 million condoms, 10 inches long and 8 inches thick. That way they'll know how big the Kiwis really are." Helen calls John, who agrees to help the Kiwis out in their hour of need. 3 days later, a van arrives in Auckland, full of boxes. A delighted Helen rushes out to open the boxes. She finds condoms 10 inches long and 8 inches thick, all colored green and gold. She then notices in small writing on each and every one, "Made in Australia, size medium." He was in ecstasy with a huge smile on his face as his wife moved forward, then backward, forward, then backward again, back and forth, in and out. She could feel the sweat on her forehead, between her breasts, and trickling down the small of her back. She was getting near to the end. Her heart was pounding. Her face was flushed. Then she moaned, softly at first, and began to groan louder. Finally, totally exhausted, she let out an almighty scream and shouted, "Okay, okay. I can't park the f***ing car. You do it, you bastard." Two men were sitting at a bar at the top of a skyscraper. Both were bending their elbows at a steady rate. The first man said, there's such an updraft on the outside of this building that if you jump off, you'll fall for a bit, but the updraft will catch you and bring you right back up to this balcony." The second guy said, "I don't believe it. You'll have to prove this to me." So the first guy goes over the balcony and jumps off. He falls and falls and falls, and then he slows in mid-drop and begins rising back up. Finally, he lightly steps back onto the balcony. "See, I told you," he says. The second guy says, "I got to try that." So he jumps off the balcony and falls and falls and falls and falls. Finally, splat on the ground. The first guy returns to the bar and orders another drink. As he serves the drink, the bartender says, "You're a mean drunk Superman." Stumpy and his wife Martha went to the state fair every year. Every year Stumpy would say, "Martha, I'd like to ride in that airplane." And every year Martha would say, "I know, Stumpy, but that airplane ride costs $10, and $10 is $10. This one year, Stumpy and Martha went to the fair, and Stumpy said, "Martha, I'm 71 years old. If I don't ride that airplane this year, I may never get another chance." Martha replied, "Stumpy, that airplane ride costs $10, and $10 is $10. The pilot overheard them and said, "Folks, I'll make you a deal. I'll take you both up for a ride. If you can stay quiet for the entire ride and not say one word, I won't charge you. But if you say one word, it's $10. Stumpy and Martha agreed, and up they go. The pilot does all kinds of twists and turns, rolls and dives, but not a word is heard. He does all his tricks over again, but still not a word. They land, and the pilot turns to Stumpy. "By golly, I did everything I could think of to get you to yell out, but you didn't." Stumpy replied, "Well, I was going to say something when Martha fell out, but $10 is $10. A man was driving along a rural road one day when he saw a three-legged chicken. He was amused enough to drive alongside it for a while. As he was driving, he noticed the chicken was running 30 miles per hour. Pretty fast chicken, he thought. I wonder just how fast it can run. So he sped up, and the chicken did too. They were now moving along the road at 45 miles per hour. The man in the car sped up again. To his surprise, the chicken was still running ahead of him at 60 miles per hour. Suddenly, the chicken turned off the road and ran down a long driveway leading to a farmhouse. The man followed the chicken to the house and saw a man in the yard and dozens of three-legged chickens. The man in the car called out to the farmer, "How did you get all these three-legged chickens?" The farmer replied, "I breed 'em. You see, it's me, my wife, and my son living here, and we all like to eat the chicken leg. Since a chicken only has 2 legs, I started breeding this three-legged variety so we could all eat our favorite piece." "That's amazing," said the driver. "How do they taste?" "Don't rightly know. Can't catch them." A few years ago, I thought it would be a good idea to purchase a cemetery plot as a birthday present for my mother-in-law. The following year, I didn't get her a present. She was not too happy about this and questioned why I didn't get her a present. I responded, "Well, you still haven't used the birthday present that I purchased for you last year." And that's how the fight started. Right before the morning bell rang, little Johnny walked up to the front desk with an incredibly concerned expression on his face. "Teacher," Johnny asked earnestly, "can a person ever get in trouble or be punished for something they didn't actually do?" The teacher looked at him, completely appalled by the thought. "Oh, absolutely not, Johnny. That would be completely unfair and unjust. I would never punish anyone for something they didn't do." Johnny let out a massive, relieved sigh of satisfaction, smiled brightly, and headed back to his desk. "Oh, that's such a relief," Johnny yelled back, "because I definitely haven't done my homework." 3 little pigs went out to dinner one night. The waiter came and took their drink order. "I would like a Sprite," said the first little piggy. "I would like a Coke," said the second little piggy. I want beer, lots and lots of beer, said the third little piggy. The drinks were brought out, and the waiter took their orders for dinner. I want a nice big steak, said the first piggy. I would like the salad plate, said the second piggy. I want beer, lots and lots of beer, said the third little piggy. The meals were brought out, and a while later the waiter approached the table and asked if the piggies would like any dessert. I want a banana split, said the first piggy. I want a cheesecake, said the second piggy. I want beer, lots and lots of beer, exclaimed the third little piggy. Pardon me for asking, said the waiter to the third little piggy, but why have you only ordered beer all evening? The third piggy says, well, somebody has to go wee all the way home. Two nuns were shopping together in a small food store one afternoon. As they walked slowly through the aisles, checking their list and placing a few items in the basket, they happened to pass the beer and liquor section. One nun stopped, looked at the beer, and whispered, "You know, a cold beer would be rather nice." The other nun looked around nervously. "I agree," she said softly, "but I would feel terribly embarrassed buying it. What would people think?" The first nun smiled calmly. "Don't worry, I'll handle it." She picked up a six-pack of beer, placed it confidently in the basket, and walked with the other nun to the checkout counter. When the cashier saw the beer, he looked up in surprise. Two nuns buying a six-pack was not something he saw every day. Noticing his expression, the first nun said smoothly, "This is for washing our hair." The cashier didn't blink. He simply nodded, reached under the counter, and placed a package of pretzel sticks into the bag with the beer. Then he looked at the nuns and said, "Here, don't forget the curlers." Stanley is looking for a new office desk and spots one that looks perfect in an antique shop window. He goes inside and asks the shopkeeper how much it is. "That desk is going for $5,000, says the shopkeeper. $5,000 for an old desk? That's outrageous, exclaims Stanley. "Ah," says the shopkeeper, "but this is a magic desk." He turns to the desk and asks, "Desk, how much money do I have in my pocket?" The desk taps one of its legs on the floor 4 times. The shopkeeper turns out his pocket, and sure enough, there are $4 coins there. "Wow, that's pretty cool," says Stan. "All right, desk, how much money does my wife have in her bank account?" At this, the desk goes wild, manically banging all 4 of its legs up and down repeatedly for over 5 minutes nonstop. "Darn, where did she get all that from?" wonders Stanley. The desk's legs slide apart and its drawers drop down.